The whole user experience of actually buying an NFT is sort of challenging. In reality, for you to be able to buy an NFT, which is like I mentioned, a digital token of a sort, you need also to have cryptocurrency. And CryptoPunks is a series of, I think, 10,000 basically faces, pixelated faces, which are considered to be a piece of art, which are now being traded for incredible amounts of money. It's because we are in a bit of an NFT bubble.
This is Chair, a place where we discuss innovations. In recent months, revolution happened in digital art market. Here to explain what NFTs are and how UNICEF plans to implement this is our guest Vladimir Trkulja. Vladimir co-founded Started, NGO that works toward elevating startup ecosystems. So, Vladimir, welcome to Chair. Pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
You are dedicated to empowering people living in developing countries. What propelled you towards working in UNICEF at the first place?
Well, it's sort of a maybe interesting personal story because at the moment when I was sort of recruited to work with UNICEF, I was at a point of my career where I was thinking, what I would like to focus on next. So my background is mostly technical, studying computer science and working my whole life in that domain. But at some point, I co-founded Started, and Started was sort of quite a crazy journey, working day and night to achieve sort of a high-level goal, empowering the startup community in Serbia, making opportunities for people and companies who would like to develop innovative products. And after I stepped down from the organization and stopped to have an active role, I was sort of at that point in life where you are open to actually explore what you want to do in your life. And at that point, I somehow stumbled. Actually, a friend of mine told me about the position that UNICEF in Serbia is seeking, and it was quite strange for me. It involved startups, it involved innovation, and there was a sort of a global innovation fund which UNICEF has created, and I was like, what is this? I never heard about this. And UNICEF in my head, as it is for most of the people, very warm memories from the childhood about the New Year greeting cards and, all of that. But at that point, I was like, this actually sounds quite interesting. And this sounds like a good add-on to what I was doing in my previous life. I applied. I went through the process, which is quite intensive, and I saw that as an opportunity to basically continue to give to the local startup community, to bring opportunities, and in this case also to bring capital from abroad, which was always one of the issues of the local startup community.
Still is.
It still is, of course. I mean, I would say that it's not the key one. Because now when you look all the funding opportunities and all the hackathons on which you can actually win 10,000 euros prize, when you compare that to the, 8 years ago when you basically have almost nothing, it's amazing development of the whole community and the opportunities for the community. So I sort of wanted to contribute more, this time from the shoes of somebody who is global institution or global organization, and to put foreign money into Serbian teams. So that was basically the idea that I was behind when I joined UNICEF, and also in my personal life. At that time I was about to become a father, and suddenly everything related to children was basically much more
making
important.
more sense, right?
Yeah. So it's like combined both personal and business related interests, and that's how I ended up here.
And that's a great situation to be in, right?
I agree. I mean, I wouldn't change it at this point.
And share with me some project that you're working right now. I'm sure that are interesting one, and we will come to NFTs through that for sure.
Yeah, so this whole story about getting involved with UNICEF happened like 3 years ago, and I'm sort of, or is it 2 years? It's actually 2 years ago, and I'm quite amazed how quickly it went. It passed. So I was focusing during this few years mostly on sourcing teams from Serbia who have interesting technology and the ideas how to improve the lives of children. Because this global UNICEF's Innovation Fund is sort of a pooled fund which has like 35 million euros plus a few million euros in cryptocurrencies to invest in teams from underdeveloped and developing countries and to support innovators in those countries who are trying to do something good for their communities and for children in their communities. So the idea is, UNICEF is looking for teams who are not from like USA or Israel or Germany or even Slovenia, who have the access to capital, who have different type of focuses, but we are looking to support people who cannot really get reasonable amounts of funding in those not so developed countries. So my focus was on finding those teams in Serbia, and it's an ongoing process. Basically, trying to identify teams who are doing something for children and doing things which are applicable on the global level, and also developing solutions using really like the newest technology, like virtual reality, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, drones, or whatever, and also making sure that those teams are developing those technologies using the open source licenses. It's not really a large amount of teams or companies who are already doing that. Yeah, it's really like a really niche community. So the focus was on trying to identify and also empower teams who are considering doing something like this, and also speaking with a lot of stakeholders like companies who are discussing spin-offs of their existing technology, which can be open source, especially in the blockchain domain, because a bunch of things in the blockchain is by default open source, to basically consider doing a spin-off or doing a specific product targeting a specific target group like children or indirectly children. And that definitely did have some success. But that's one part of the things that I do. On the larger scale, you also try to follow up on companies who do get into the program. So UNICEF Innovation Fund is giving like $100,000, and teams get into 1 year program where they get mentoring, when they get support, all the usual accelerator/incubator stuff. And working with those teams is interesting. I'm working mostly with teams who are from Serbia or from the region, from the West Balkans region. And so far we had one investment in a team from Serbia, and that team is developing a VR and AR platform for education to help pupils and their teachers to get into complicated topics using virtual reality to explain something like experiments in the chemistry or physics or some math concepts by using VR and AR, which is like much more compelling to children. So that's something that I'm focusing on, and hopefully this is a global story. So like Serbia is just one of the countries which can teams from Serbia can actually compete with all other countries, with all other teams from the global South countries to get this funding. But also we are now working in the local UNICEF to basically find ways to focus a bit more on the local issues of children, because local problems in Serbia and local problems of children in African countries, for example, they're really not the same. I mean, we do have a lot of issues which are related to children, but they are not on the same level or the same severity or the same even type as children in non-developed countries are facing. So that's something that we are now trying to a bit decentralize the approach, try to get some funding for the local tech community to solve the issues which the local UNICEF country office has identified as the crucial for the children in Serbia.
So it's very interesting how you connected the dots from the technological perspective, and that what you're doing with UNICEF and with their mission to help children. And we're coming to our main subject of today, of NFTs, and how this get in that picture that you just painted.
Yeah, so you could say that we are now in a sort of a NFT hype, and that everything related to NFTs is getting a lot of attention, especially from the community which is connected around the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies. But let's try to explain what the NFTs are, because it's sort of an interesting collection of words, and you could say that an NFT is basically a digital asset which sits on the top of a blockchain, and that asset is pointing or is a piece of content. It can be an image or video or audio or text or combination of it. So NFTs are one of the ways that blockchain can be used to tokenize or to represent different things. And this NFT craze didn't actually start now. It started like in 2017 and later, where the earliest popular things like CryptoPunks have been created. And CryptoPunks is a series of, I think, 10,000 basically faces, pixelated faces, which are considered to be a piece of art, which are now being traded for incredible amounts of money. So they're being sold on the secondary market for millions of dollars. And the important thing about these CryptoPunks and every other NFT, almost every other NFT that we're speaking about, is that they are unique. There's only one piece of it. And you can verify all the important parameters describing this NFT. Who is the creator? Who is the owner? You can see on a digital ledger, which the blockchain is, basically all the history when this NFT was initially minted or created, who bought it, then who bought it after that, what it represents, what is its current value, and so on. So this is sort of revolutionizing the art industry. And we are now seeing that many artists who are either digital artists or you would say the offline world artists are starting to create digital assets, digital art, and put them on the blockchain in order to create NFTs. And they're being bought for often quite a lot of money. You can also argue that it's because we are in a bit of an NFT bubble, and people are hoping that by investing in NFTs, their value is going up. And in a 1 year or 2 year or 10 years, something that they bought for $500 or equivalent in the cryptocurrency would be worth 100,000 or 1,000 times more. And I mean, with this experiment with CryptoPunks, it actually is proving to be
right.
very, very true. But of course, I mean, it's still to be seen how this is going to look like. Of course, when you speak about the NFT art, it's not just like these pixelated faces. There are many art pieces now that you can buy as NFTs. You can buy the Banksy's works. There are very famous digital artists like Beeple, who is also selling his art as NFT, and his NFT piece was actually sold for tens of millions of dollars a few months ago. So this is really like growing community. And also when you look at this recent crypto, well, I would not say crash, but sort of a bigger dip which happened like a few weeks ago, the volumes and the amounts of NFT trading didn't really fall that much. So it's like thing which is happening, which is you might argue that it is a bubble, but I think that we are now beyond the point where you can say that this is not going to work. You know, like all of this is going to work $0. No, it's not. It's probably going to worth much more, maybe at some point a bit less, but it's generally growing.
Well, that was a bubble with the internet as well. So, but today everybody is using it, right?
That's a great analogy. You know, like that's a great point. So I think that, you know, like this art is only one example. And with art, it's also interesting that, I mean, as somebody who is not really connected with the art community, I don't know much about that. But the thing that I understand is that as an original content creator, if you're an artist and you, let's say, create a picture, you create a painting and you sell it and you earn some money. After that, you know, like if that picture gets resold, you don't actually have anything out of that. Or maybe you're building yourself a name or having some sort of other value, but you're not earning money for that.
Connected with that specific art.
Yeah, but with NFTs, it's a bit different. You know, like as an original NFT creator, you can say that you want to have like 5 to 10%, it's usually 5 to 10% of each consecutive sale of that art piece, which is happening on the secondary market. And that's happening automatically. So, for example, you create an art piece, I buy it from you, and then somebody else buys it from me. From that person who bought it from me, from the value that it was bought for, like let's say that's like I don't know, let's say that I'm really good at art and it's sold for like $1 million. 10% of that would really like go to the original art creator, and that would happen automatically because NFTs are basically smart contracts on a blockchain, and all you need for that to happen is to have the wallet address of the original artist who created the art. So after each sale, it automatically happens. The money, the digital currencies, are automatically transferred to the artist's wallet, and that just happens. So that's sort of really like revolutionizing the art world in this sense. And it's going to be interesting to see how this is developing, because a lot of institutional creators of content are getting into this domain, especially people who are doing the collectible cards like Doctor Who or the American Baseball League or the NBA Top Shot, which is now quite hyped, and so on.
They're using at this point something that there is a lot of money in it, but it's going to be spread on the other dimensions as well.
Yeah, definitely, because like we, like humans, really like to possess things. Like we want to have something that we are attached to. So also that's a big difference. That's this non-fungible in this NFT name. So they're non-fungible tokens. If you take a $5 bill or $10 bill or whatever bill, it's like fungible, like it's replaceable. You can exchange it for any other dollar bill because that's it. But like your dog or my cat, like they're non-fungible. You cannot really like exchange it for another cat, even if they look the same, but it's not that cat. So those are the thing with NFTs. People just want to possess something that they grow attached to, as it is with the art in the physical world. And that brings us to the point of how actually UNICEF is going to utilize the NFTs. So on the local level in UNICEF in Serbia, we are sort of exploring the NFTs as a sort of vehicle to do fundraising. UNICEF is the only UN agency which is solely responsible for its own budget. So whatever UNICEF spends, UNICEF needs to fundraise, either from governments or from institutional donors or from the private donors. And we see this NFT thing as a great opportunity to do an experiment, like to see if people or companies would be willing to actually buy the NFTs, which were co-created with UNICEF and the local artists and sportsmen or sportswomen or game artists in Serbia, and to buy them in order to advance children's agenda. So, like, we are planning to offer certain unique art pieces to the general public in Serbia in a form of NFTs in order to fundraise for a certain specific goal, like maybe for the neonatology wards in Serbia, or for buying additional incubators, or for something else which is at that point important. This year we are sort of celebrating the 75th anniversary of UNICEF. And this looks like a very interesting thing to do to commemorate this. And UNICEF is actually, like trying to be innovative, because we define innovation as doing something new or different, which brings value. And we definitely see this approach for fundraising as something that can bring really a great value to every stakeholder in this domain, to children as the direct beneficiary of this whole experiment, to companies or individuals who would like to possess or to have something which is like a digital art co-created with UNICEF and the artists, and for those artists also, because we see this as a great way also for them to maybe put what they are doing in the focus. So we are looking forward to this experiment, which should be happening in the next few months, and to see how the local market is actually reacting to this sort of opportunity.
So why Serbia? Why is Serbia interesting to UNICEF to try this for the first time?
When you say UNICEF, like people usually think about this huge organization which is basically present in each country and territory. But in reality, like every country or territory has its own UNICEF country office. And those country offices are organized and coordinated by the regional offices, which are then, coordinated by the headquarters in New York. But, in reality, you have a lot of opportunities as a country office to explore things that are interesting for the local market and which seem to be innovative. Because from my experience, it may not look like that, but in UNICEF there's quite a potential and quite a sort of a positive attitude on doing something innovative. And when we were discussing the topic of cryptocurrencies, which is by itself quite interesting, and we came to the topic of NFTs, it was like, oh my God, this fits perfectly, UNICEF was well known for the greeting cards. That business, that activity is sort of now outsourced. What if we could do something which relates to that, but is using the new technologies and new paradigm to offer something which is now more appropriate for this time? So to answer your question, basically it comes to the point that it was a local initiative by a few of us to try to do something innovative. And we already see that there's a lot of interest from the regional office is, like to see how this pilot goes in Serbia, and then to try to scale it. Yeah. So it's like nobody is going to forbid you to do something new or interesting, because that's actually also the mandate of UNICEF in each country. Like UNICEF, whatever is UNICEF doing, you're trying to validate that the thing that you're trying to improve can be improved by doing certain measures. And if you have a good results of the pilot or of the prototype, you are basically looking for a stakeholder, and that is usually the some sort of governmental agency or ministry or a civil sector, which is going to take this measure and institutionalize it. So like UNICEF is not interested to like continue all the time doing something repeatedly and
just
investigate it.
For the government.
Like this works. Like now, if we agree that this really works, brings value for the local community, now you as a government can take it and like absorb it into your programs and your plans. Of course, when we are speaking about NFTs, that's sort of an internal UNICEF thing, because it's like actually helping UNICEF be better in what UNICEF does as its core sort of, I cannot say businesses, but as its sort of core activity, and that is fundraising.
Yeah. So to go back to NFTs, what you can see or what you think will be the biggest obstacles that you need to overcome with this initiative?
Yeah, the whole user experience of actually buying an NFT is sort of challenging. Like I do foresee that when we say, okay, like you can now buy a digital asset, and the money from that is going to go for children. That sounds really good. I mean, and we expect that people and companies will be willing to do so.
An idea can be sold.
Yeah. So it's like it's totally okay. Instead of donating directly, you actually sort of buy something. You get something for your money. But in reality, like for you to be able to buy an NFT, which is like I mentioned, a digital token of a sort, you need also to have cryptocurrency. So the process is not so straightforward, and in order for companies or individuals to actually buy NFT, they first need to buy a specific cryptocurrency, in this case probably Ether, which can also maybe be a bit challenging. Like you need to buy something with fiat money, dinars or a foreign currency, and then you exchange that for a cryptocurrency, and then you spend this cryptocurrency to basically get an NFT. Right? Yeah. So making this process as straightforward as possible and giving a good explanation how that works, that's basically one of the challenges, because the whole NFT market is organized into sort of online markets where you list your NFTs, and we are going to use one of them, but we're also going to have a sort of a micro website or a dedicated landing page on a UNICEF Serbia website where we explain this process. Like when we really tell to people and give them like steps how you actually, like first of course what are NFTs and why it would be interesting to have one and what it is contributing to, and which steps you actually need to take in order to actually buy NFT. So I see that as one of the obstacles, but that's something like in the business you would say that that's creating a market. And we as a UN agency and the whole innovation hype is also happening inside the different UN agencies. And there's a lot of pushing to be innovative, to do things, to do new things, to set hypotheses, to test it, like to quickly validate if something works or not. We are more than willing to, try to see how this goes, and also to help the local stakeholders in the blockchain and crypto domain to be more visible and to put cryptocurrencies and NFTs and the whole blockchain thing into a more public narrative, like to mainstream it a bit more, because of course this whole thing with UNICEF's NFTs is going to have quite a big visibility in mass media, and you're going to speak really quite a lot about that. This is probably the first time that I mention it, although we do not have the whole thing ready yet.
Premiere here, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So this all sounds enthusiastic, but are there any negative sides of NFTs?
Of course,
always two sides of the same medal, right?
First, it depends from which side you look at the negative sides. Would UNICEF be able to fundraise more money if we just said please donate and this is the cause, and just send your money to this bank account or so? Probably that would attract some other type of target group, but the fundraised amount would be probably the same. The process is well known, and we would in theory even be able to fundraise a bit more. But like I said, we look at this as a sort of validating a hypothesis that there's a whole segment of people who is interested in this topic and who are actually willing to donate just because they're actually participating in something which is good, and they're also getting a sort of a cool digital asset for that, because these NFTs are actually going to be quite cool. Also, when we speak about the negative things, there's a lot of hype again on the sustainability of the blockchain. That blockchains are eating quite a lot of energy, that there's a huge environmental effect because you need a lot of electricity to secure and validate blockchains, like this mining thing. But we also never said we are not going to use internet. Because internet also requires electricity. So that is maybe just a current narrative, and also in the long run, many blockchains which are considered to be the future of blockchains, or how the blockchains and cryptocurrencies are going to look in the future, are currently migrating for this sort of mining thing, which is based on a proof of work algorithm, where you actually need to solve very complex mathematical operations in order to validate blocks. They're moving to a proof of stake, which is a completely different thing, which is much more similar to the internet approach, where you actually have nodes on which people put their own tokens, and these tokens are locked and they are used to secure and validate everything that's happening on that blockchain. This proof of stake approach is using immensely less electricity than the proof of work. And that's probably
much less calculations and everything.
Yeah, probably. The Bitcoin, as the biggest and the most well-known cryptocurrency, is going to stay on the proof of work, because Bitcoin is basically digital gold. It's just a store of value. You buy Bitcoin, you put it somewhere, and it just sits there. But the second and especially the third generation of blockchains, they're much more than that. They are basically internet computers which can do different operations, which can do whatever you want them to do, like these smart contracts, and they I think that basically all of them in future are going to migrate away from the proof of work algorithm. So this kind of environmental impact, I would not say that that's probably now quite big as a mainstream topic. It's not even mainstream, but it's present in the media. But in the long run, that's not going to be an issue.
So you started to talk about the future regarding the blockchain, but let's finish with the future of NFT, how it looks like.
Nobody knows at this point. Like this phase where we are, that's basically like exploring what can be tokenized and what can be made as an NFT, and what are the real use cases for these kind of things. So the blockchain generally, I mean, has had, and it still in a way has, this issue of really trying to find the real life use cases for using the blockchain. And the last few years, they're actually emerging. Like there are cases where actually using a blockchain is not only like a cool hipsterish thing to do, like you're having a project on a blockchain, you're having a blockchain startup and so on, to situations where actually blockchain is a key and integral part of deploying the solution that is a solution for a problem that you're trying to solve. So NFTs now, I mean, you can say that in the art industry, they're definitely here to stay. I think that digital virtual exhibitions, combining the virtual and augmented reality with art, which is on a blockchain as NFTs, that's something that's already happening. The COVID pandemics definitely show that. It's people are already going to virtual exhibitions and museums where they can take a look at some of the artworks, where they can actually buy them from from the virtual environment. And where they are buying also the virtual avatars, which are NFTs, which are representing them, which can also be customized and so on. So I would say that one of the next big things where NFTs are going to move into are accessorized sort of wearable things. Like you buy a jacket, and with this jacket you also get an NFT, which proves that you are the owner of that jacket, and you can display it somewhere, you can show it, you can even get certain let's say bonuses or offers based on that you are easily verified as the owner of that jacket. So still the space for NFTs is rather new, and there are a lot of teams globally who are working on developing new use cases, how the NFTs are going to be used. I think that the luxury segment is really one of the things where the NFTs are probably going to penetrate first, because
of the value and everything.
Yeah, the value is big, the items are expensive. People who are in this segment and who are buying the products or services from this segment usually want something additional, and the NFTs sound like a perfect companion to your, I don't know, Lamborghini or whatever, so it's probably one of the directions. But tokenizing real estate, that's a huge market that's now begun. That's not really now, it's a year back, beginning to explore this whole topic.
Vladimir, thank you so much for this conversation. I enjoyed it today, and for you out there, subscribe, and next Thursday, next innovation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.